Have you ever felt as if you were moving through life while fighting battles that no one else could see? Waking each morning with a mind already overflowing with that rush forward faster than you can anchor them. Stepping into the weight of responsibilities that seem to press into your chest. Questioning whether the path ahead of you is stable or disappearing beneath your feet. And yet still forcing yourself to present a calm, controlled face to the world as though nothing inside you is trembling. Countless people live in precisely this condition, spending years reacting instead of directing, living overwhelmed rather than purposeful, and surrendering their emotional balance to the circumstances that surround them as though they had no control over their inner world at all. They allow fear to seep into their choices, they let doubt steer their actions, and without realizing it, they hand away their personal power to situations, to expectations, to pressures, to people, until they no longer remember how strength is supposed to feel. But imagine, even for a moment, that there exists a mental framework capable of dismantling all of this fragility, a way of thinking so stable and disciplined that even when life becomes turbulent, you remain anchored, composed, and unmovable. When this kind of mindset becomes part of who you are, others sense it instantly because your presence carries a different weight, a different gravity, something that commands respect, something that quiets weakness long before any words are spoken. Today, we enter the mind of someone who lived this reality with absolute conviction, Miyamoto Musashi, a warrior whose legacy was not built merely on 60 undefeated duels, but on his mastery over the silent internal conflicts that most people run from their entire lives. The fact that you are here, listening to these words, tells me that you are searching for a version of yourself that is stronger, clearer, steadier, a version that doesn't collapse when the world becomes unpredictable, and that is precisely what Musashi represents. Musashi is often remembered as an ancient figure from a distant chapter of Japanese history, but if you look closely, you find one of the greatest examples of mental discipline and psychological resilience ever recorded. Born in a period of unending conflict and profound instability, he stepped into the path of the warrior before he even understood what adulthood meant. At 13 years old, he faced his first real duel, a moment that would have destroyed the determination of most grown men, and emerged victorious. From that moment on, he walked a path that transformed him into a living legend. What set Musashi apart was not merely talent or physical power. It was the early understanding that the ultimate battlefield is always the mind. While other samurai focused intensely on perfecting their sword techniques and external forms, Musashi was building something far more decisive, an internal foundation of discipline, clarity, and mental sharpness that could not be shaken by chaos. He expanded far beyond the role of a warrior, becoming a strategist of remarkable insight, a philosopher who challenged convention and an artist whose understanding of life stretched beyond technique and into the realm of mastery itself. His teachings, preserved in the Book of Five Rings, reveal principles that apply not only to combat, but to every dimension of life. How to think clearly, how to act decisively, and how to master oneself before attempting to conquer anything in the external world. Musashi's presence was so mentally overwhelming that many opponents surrendered before the duel even began, defeated not by his sword, but by the force of his composure. This was not intimidation born from aggression, but from an aura shaped through years of inner discipline. Modern psychologists would describe this as an extraordinary level of psychological resilience, the ability to maintain emotional balance, cognitive clarity, and strategic focus under conditions of extreme pressure. What Musashi understood centuries ago is now supported by neuroscience. Mental strength is not an innate gift, but a trainable capacity, a skill that expands through deliberate effort and repeated exposure to challenge. So what does it truly mean to cultivate what people now call a monster mindset? It is not about harshness or brutality, but about developing a deeper steadiness, a discipline that does not collapse in crisis, a focus that does not dissolve under discomfort, and a presence that remains stable even when everything else feels unstable. When you recall the last significant challenge you faced, a confrontation that unsettled you, a financial difficulty that threatened your security, a personal loss that pierced through your defenses. Ask yourself how you responded. Many people panic, make impulsive decisions, or withdraw from responsibility entirely. Musashi did the opposite. He viewed adversity as essential, as something that sharpens rather than destroys. He did not wait for life to become easier. He learned to become stronger with each hardship. To think like this means seeing difficulties not as punishments, but as instructors, approaching discomfort as a forge, and interpreting fear as a signpost pointing toward growth. It means asking, what is this teaching me? Rather than, why is this happening to me? Fear itself is not the enemy. Weakness itself is not the enemy. The true enemy is surrendering your actions to those emotions. When you stop avoiding discomfort and instead meet it directly with awareness and courage, you change the architecture of your mind. You become someone who does not lose clarity in chaos, who does not break under pressure, who does not allow external circumstances to shape internal identity. Whether in a professional crisis, a personal conflict, or a private emotional struggle, you remain centered because your stability comes from within. A Stanford neuroscientist discovered that individuals who continuously practice mental conditioning develop measurable structural changes in the brain, particularly in the regions associated with emotional regulation and the stress response. In other words, the mind physically reshapes itself to become more resilient. Musashi's life, more than the battles he won, left behind principles that translate seamlessly into modern life. And these principles form the foundation of a mindset that cannot be easily broken. The first principle is unmistakably direct. The way is in training. Musashi believed that excellence emerges not from occasional bursts of effort, but from daily repetition, from mastering fundamentals, from showing up even on days when motivation is nowhere to be found. The second principle teaches the importance of recognizing both the benefit and the damage present in every choice, understanding that short-term comfort often leads to long-term cost, and that short-term effort often leads to long-term strength. Musashi knew that even winning could be dangerous if it made you complacent, and that certain losses could shape you into someone far more capable than victory ever could. The third principle may sound almost mystical at first glance, yet when examined closely, it reveals itself as one of the most practical and grounded skills a person can develop: the ability to perceive what is not immediately visible. Musashi's victories were never the result of brute force alone. They were the product of a mind trained to understand the subtleties of the environment, to detect the slightest shifts in energy, to sense intention long before an opponent even lifted their hand. What many call intuition is, in truth, a refined sensitivity born from presence, awareness, and repeated exposure to experience. And to avoid misunderstanding, this is not about superstition or magical thinking. It is about cultivating a level of situational awareness so sharp that you begin noticing information most people walk past without ever registering. Most people drift through life in a kind of waking sleep, moving on autopilot while ignoring the signals unfolding around them, missing countless opportunities simply because they are too distracted or disconnected to see them. They walk blindly into unnecessary conflicts because they fail to read emotional tension in a room. They make unwise decisions because they observe only surface details and never look deeper. In your everyday life, this principle begins with learning to be present, not in the superficial, trendy sense of the word, but in the profound sense of tuning your attention to what is happening beneath the noise. It is the ability to sense when a conversation requires quiet rather than response, when a moment calls for patience instead of movement, when a path invites reflection rather than action. It is a way of reading the unspoken layers of the world, the hidden currents within people, and the deeper shifts within yourself. Once this skill begins to sharpen, patterns emerge everywhere. You notice deception before the words even fully form. You feel when a business decision is turning subtly in the wrong direction. You detect the early tremors of conflict within a relationship long before it erupts visibly. This sensitivity is not about being psychic. It is about being observant to a degree that most people never reach. A cognitive science professor at Oxford discovered that individuals who cultivate this type of deep situational awareness show increased activation in brain regions responsible for recognizing patterns and predicting future outcomes. In simple terms, they develop the mental ability to notice what others overlook. Principle 4 introduces one of the most defining aspects of Musashi's philosophy: adaptability. He understood with absolute clarity that no single technique, no matter how well mastered, could carry a warrior through every possible battle. The stance, the rhythm, the strategy, all had to shift depending on the opponent, the terrain, the circumstance. And this timeless truth applies even more urgently today than it did in Musashi's era. In a world that changes at extraordinary speed, clinging to what no longer works is the fastest way to become stagnant. If a strategy is failing, change it. If a plan collapses, rebuild it. If a method no longer produces results, evolve it. The real mistake is not falling. It is refusing to evolve in response to reality. Researchers in organizational psychology at Wharton discovered that the most resilient and successful leaders are those who interpret setbacks not as personal failures, but as valuable data for recalibration. They adjust, refine, adapt, and move forward with greater intelligence. Now that these principles are understood, they must be carried into the arena of daily life, because a monster mindset is not something to admire from afar. It must be lived through action. The difference between understanding these ideas and embodying them is the same difference between watching a fitness video and actually training your body. Knowledge without implementation is nothing more than mental entertainment. Consider your work life. The deadlines that press against your nerves, the expectations that challenge your confidence, the workload that might feel heavier than you can manage, and the quiet insecurities that sometimes whisper in the back of your mind. Many people respond to these pressures by panicking, reacting impulsively, drowning in anxiety, or blaming external circumstances for their internal turmoil. But Musashi did not react, he responded. He observed without rushing, strategized without fear, and acted with clarity. When faced with a formidable opponent, he did not collapse emotionally. He analyzed, adapted, and executed with precision. To apply this mindset in your own professional life means learning to distinguish between what you cannot control and what you can. You cannot command your boss's mood, but you can control the professionalism of your response. You cannot dictate market shifts, but you can strengthen your preparation. You cannot eliminate office politics, but you can elevate your conduct. This is the difference between emotional reactivity and strategic living. It is the posture of someone who knows exactly where they stand. When chaos erupts around you, you become the stabilizing presence others instinctively turn toward. Research from a professor of management psychology at Northwestern University demonstrated that individuals who develop this resilience become significantly more productive and far more likely to be promoted, not because they are the most talented, but because they can remain reliable and composed under pressure. Now consider the realm of your relationships. How many conflicts could have been avoided if you had listened more carefully? How many arguments escalated simply because you spoke when silence would have resolved everything? How often do emotions hijack your responses and turn minor misunderstandings into unnecessary battles? Musashi watched his opponents carefully, identifying their intention before they struck. You can do the same emotionally by observing the signals beneath people's words, listening with presence, and refusing to fight meaningless wars. This means knowing the right moment to speak and the right moment to hold back. It means realizing that winning an argument may cost you the relationship. It means possessing the strength to apologize when you are wrong and the self-respect to set boundaries when you are right. Most conflicts are not about the surface issue. They arise from deeper needs: respect, security, understanding that have gone unheard. When you learn to read those deeper layers, you stop treating symptoms and start addressing real causes. This, too, is the work of a warrior, because the greatest warriors are not those who dominate others, but those who master themselves so fully that they inspire the best in those around them. In your personal development, the principle becomes even more essential. You know the fear that holds you back, that voice that whispers you aren't ready, that you lack the experience, that you need more preparation, or that the perfect moment hasn't arrived. Musashi did not wait for readiness. He stepped into action, using every mistake as a lesson and every difficulty as a forge. He understood that readiness is created by action, not the other way around. The monster mindset reframes every intimidating moment as a training ground. That public speaking opportunity you fear, training ground. That business idea that feels uncertain, training ground. That difficult conversation you've avoided, training ground. There is no defeat for those who choose to learn from everything. Life will not always be gentle, but you can meet it with strength, clarity, and strategic courage. This is the divide between those who merely endure life and those who become unbreakable. A developmental psychology researcher at Yale followed individuals over 2 decades and found that those who approach challenges as opportunities for growth achieved far greater satisfaction and success than those who avoided discomfort. To embody this mindset, you need a daily ritual, simple yet powerful, something that sharpens your mental edge every single day, just as Musashi sharpened his sword. The difference between highly successful people and everyone else is not ambition. It is the presence of systems. They rely on discipline, not motivation. They create momentum through routine, not emotion. Morning intention. When you wake up, before opening your phone or letting the world invade your mind, define your intention. Identify the challenge you will conquer today, whether it is procrastination, fear, emotional fatigue, or a specific task you've been avoiding. Writing it down transforms vague desire into committed direction. Strategic action. Choose one deliberate action that symbolizes your intention. It could be training your body, feeding your mind through study, or initiating a difficult but necessary conversation. Perform this action with presence, treating it not as busy work, but as ritual. Purpose is what turns motion into transformation. Evening reflection. At night, review your behavior and growth. Ask yourself what succeeded, what failed, how you handled stress, and whether you acted in alignment with the person you want to become. This is not routine. It is sacred discipline, the ongoing sharpening of your inner blade. A habit formation researcher at Duke University found that individuals who follow such consistent daily structures dramatically increase their grit, their ability to persevere through long, difficult journeys, and experience greater confidence in navigating life's challenges. You do not need to live in ancient Japan to be a warrior. The battle exists inside you every day. Musashi teaches that true strength is born from discipline, strategy, and the courage to confront your own fears. When you develop this monster mindset, you craft a life of intention, resilience, and continuous transformation. The mind you build today determines the victories you will claim tomorrow. So tell me, what battle are you choosing to win today? If this message inspired you, press like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs it. Until next time, keep your mind sharp and your spirit unshakable. And thank you for walking this journey with Wisdom Timeless Path.